Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you for stopping by to watch. Today's video is not necessarily prepping related, but I do believe that it is a conversation that folks like you and I should be having and thinking about. And that is the control and manipulation of the media. And when I say media, it really is a very wide spanning term here, all encompassing internet, social media, mainstream media, everything. Over the past week and a half or so, it's become extremely apparent that this media as a whole is very controlling of the message that they choose to get out. And they are using their strength and their tentacles to control what you say also. But this is not new news, is it? We've known about this for years. I mean, for years we've talked about how newspapers and TV stations across the United States that used to be owned by hundreds of different companies are now pretty much down to, 3, 4 different companies own the vast majority of all of them. This creates a monopoly on information. And it's going to continue to create problems for us of not being able to get our information out and to be able to consume factual truth. There are ways to do that, but it's becoming more and more difficult. And so I think we have to start becoming very serious about what we choose to listen to, where we get our information, and what mediums that we're even going to partake in. Look at things like Facebook and Twitter. They are being extremely controlling of what you share. And even if they allow it, they're putting all these disclaimers on it. There's been numerous accounts deleted. And then here on YouTube even, YouTube is notorious for censorship. And even the times that they're not censoring, they're certainly in their algorithms reducing the amount of times that people can even see your video. This was brought up a few months back. I believe it was Breitbart News talked about how Google, and YouTube is part of Google, is purposely not showing their information. So if you go to Google and you do a Google search for something, they were able to show how the algorithms of Google are not allowing their website to be shown. This is the same thing that's happening here on YouTube. You're just not seeing it. I'm hearing it all the time from listeners that we're not seeing your videos in our feed. We're not seeing any prepper videos in our feed. I've had numerous people over the past week tell me in comments and send me personal messages saying, hey, I tried to actually like your video and it wouldn't let me do it. I clicked the like button over and over again and it just didn't happen. Is this a glitch? Is this just an innocent glitch, or is there something more nefarious to it? I tend to believe with all the things that we're seeing, especially in the last 6 months, that there is something more nefarious. There cannot be just that many coincidences. It's kind of like voting machines that keep counting the wrong vote. Eventually, you're going to figure out that there's a pattern there, right? It can't just all be a coincidence. So what are our options? This is not a new problem. If you go back through all throughout history, governments, people, power that is controlling, one of the main things they do is they try to control the information that's getting out there. They control it through censoring you, through preventing information to be released, and through disinformation. So this is nothing new. It's just trying to figure out ways that we can get around it with the technology that we're using. There's so many ways that we can get information out, but how many ways can an average person do that on our own? And that's where it becomes difficult because of the monopolies out there of these big tech companies. There is a lot of people that believe that a lot of what we're seeing happening between the pandemic and the the election and maybe even the whole Great Reset is really, in the end, a big battle between tech companies. And we do know that the Great Reset is very focused, highly focused on technology. So it continually brings up the question, what are we supposed to do? Do we just continue to take a beating and stay on places like Facebook and watch Fox News? Or do we find alternatives? Well, most of us, we find alternatives. But what happens when those alternatives are on platforms that are constantly blocking them? It creates more problems. There are alternatives to all of these, and we've seen just this week websites like Parler and MeWe, which are alternatives to Twitter and Facebook, respectively, have become quite popular. I've tried them out. I'm on there, but I'll admit the interface just isn't quite as good, and there's certainly not a lot of people on there. If enough people get on, could it be interesting and useful? I guess so. But what happens when someday those get bought out? Because it can happen. It's happened in the past. The same way with YouTube. There's several alternatives for YouTube, but I'll be honest with you, I haven't found any that's a real good alternative to YouTube. I've been posting my videos on another channel I created over on BitChute. You can find me over there, and I will try as much as I can to post all my videos on there also. So if you're wanting to get off of YouTube, you'll be able to watch me there. But it's just not as good. It's not as good for us creators. It takes hours because their system is so slow. And it just doesn't have the options that YouTube has because they're small. Eventually, maybe there will be something better. There's a new company, I guess, starting up. I know very little about it. I've only heard about it. It's called Lighthouse, and Lighthouse is spelled with 3 I's. I've actually been invited to be in on a beta test conference call this week to try to find out more about it as a content creator here on YouTube, of possibly setting something up on there. So if that pans out, I'll certainly try it out. Apparently, they're saying that it's going to be like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube kind of all combined. But in the end, you and I, we have to be able to get the message out that we need to get out, and to find the truth. A big problem, I believe, that is going on with the average person. I'm not talking about leadership of the left, politicians and stuff. I'm talking about your average Joe citizen on the street that has supported people like Joe Biden. Some of them, maybe they enjoy that idea of that radical left. But you know what? The majority of them, and I've talked to many of them, they're not like that. They're not really much different than you and I. Oh, they may differ a little bit on particular policies, but in the end, they just want what's best for this country. The problem is with most people, and you could make the same argument for the extreme on the right, is that their ideas only come from the limited and very manipulated information that they're getting. We have a flood, a gluttony of information right at our fingertips. The problem is being able to discern what is actual truth. And to give you an example, how the media and the left is, for years now, and has been doing it constantly through the election, beating up President Trump, saying he's a racist because of the comments he made at the South Carolina riots a few years ago. And they have this little sound bite, and you've all heard it, where he says, yeah, there was some good people down there on both sides. And so they play that over and over again, and they're saying, see, he was talking about all those, racist, Nazi, white supremacists down there. But they don't play the full clip. And in the full clip, he specifically says, other than the white supremacists and the Nazis that I don't associate with, the rest of the people, meaning the normal Republicans and the normal Democrats that were there were good people on both sides. That not everyone at that protest were bad. Only those really extreme, white supremacists and Black Lives Matter that were just trying to stir it up. That's what he was trying to say. But you won't hear that in the media because they only want you to hear their little narrow narrative that they control and manipulate. And in the end, we have a lot of people out there that's the only place that they're getting their information, and they buy it. We're seeing that now with all the election debacle. New York Times this morning, front page headline is that it's been determined by officials that there was no election fraud whatsoever, which is an absolute lie. It's not been determined. They use the phrase widespread. There is no widespread election fraud. Well, widespread's very relative. Is it happening in every state, in every city, and everywhere? No, probably not. Is it happening in a few specific areas that they chose to commit their fraud in to try to sway an election? Probably yes. But the average American doesn't see that. We can fall into the same thing by getting information wrong on our side. So we have to always be careful of the information we're getting and do the research on our own. Just because it comes from some guy like me that you have grown to enjoy and trust, maybe, doesn't mean that you should believe everything that I say. You should do your due diligence to research the information that you find online. And don't just watch a YouTube video or read a Facebook post or read a meme and say, oh, see, that's what it is. Because that's where we get ourselves wrong. We have to, much like we stand our ground against this globalism and then this destruction of liberty here in the United States, we have to stand our ground against misinformation and manipulation by the media. If these alternatives that are out there, thinking of Newsmax and other news channels, or Parler and MeWe and this new Lighthouse, if those end up being good alternatives, then we should support them. It may mean that we have to give up certain things that we like about the big mainstream platforms, but we have to vote in every way we can with our voice and with our money to show that this junk out there is wrong and it's not something that we want to partake in. Now, you could also do it by just saying, I'm not partaking in any of it, and turn it off. I had done that for years. Before I started this YouTube channel, I had swore off pretty much of all the internet, and especially social media. I had no social media accounts whatsoever until I started this channel. And because of the channel, I do have them now because, I need to find information and be able to communicate with a lot of people because of this channel, especially as it grows. But I'll be honest with you, I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. And I wish we didn't have to have it. Wish it didn't exist. But nevertheless, it does. And we complain a lot. We complain a lot because of the Nancy Pelosi's in the world are trying to take over and rule. But it's also a problem that we don't actually take a stand sometimes. In the last few days, the content that I've been putting out, a lot of people are saying, yeah, it's great, but there's also a lot of people saying, yeah, but is anyone actually going to take a stand? Is anyone actually gonna put their, draw their line in the sand and say, it's not happening. We're not crossing this line anymore. And if you do, there will be some pretty harsh consequences. Because every time we draw that line in the sand and we say that, they step over it and we take a step back. And then we draw it again, they step over it and we take a step back. We have to, at some point, you and I, stop breaking the lines. How to do that, how to get enough people to finally become resolved in their conviction to where they completely, cut off the media before they completely, secede really from the system. I don't know. I don't know how to do that or how to get enough people to do that. But in the end, we can talk about civil war and how we'll stand our ground and we'll, fight to the last bullet. But if we're not willing to take a stand against censorship in the media, or against companies that are overtly supporting this opposition, Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and these radical left ideologies. If we're not willing to take a stand and draw our line there and say we're not allowing that in our lives, do you really think we're going to, lock and load and go out onto a battlefield and fight them? Unlikely. The right side of the political spectrum, I've said for years, our biggest enemy is that we're so divided amongst ourselves. We're like a bunch of cats trying to herd them into a box or something. It's nearly impossible. So I don't really have a solution to that. But what I can tell you is that each one of us have to start realizing that divided we will fall, and that is their greatest thing against us. That's the best tactic that they have to use against us within our conservative constitutional side and as Americans, is to divide us. Your fellow Democrat voter out there on the street is not really your enemy. They're just as much a brother or sister as you and I are. It's the people that are way above at the top that's trying to instigate all this, that's trying to disperse the message and try to break us apart and take over. That's the real enemy. And we have to realize that your coworker that voted for Biden is not the one you should be fighting. And we can hope and pray that we won't end up in a situation like the war between the states where we're fighting once again our fellow brother. It would be really great if the American people could join together and fight the actual enemy this time. But who knows if that's actually going to happen. We can start at least by taking a stand, I feel, with our money and with the information that we use and share and that kind of stuff. And so little by little, maybe we can break the bonds of social media and mainstream media. For now, I'll be here on YouTube, mostly because there's not a real good alternative to it. There are alternatives, they're just not really good. And when one of those good alternatives come up, then I will pretty much probably disassociate from YouTube if it works out that way. But we have to start somewhere. We have to be able to stand up against this, and if we don't, we've lost. So, give me your ideas. Let me know what your thoughts are, what your ideas of where to go to and how to take a stand right now, before the bullets start flying, to send a message to the people in charge that we're not going to take it from you any longer, and we're going to end our ties with you and the junk and the garbage that you're spewing out. All right, folks, thank you all for watching. Catch you in the next video.